Oh, hi there, listeners. Welcome to springtime. Today's the first really beautiful day of the year. And you know what? It's seeped into my bloodstream a bit, I think. The sunny rays and the beautiful flowers and spring ephemerals coming up out of the ground. Today's the first day I've been in a good mood for a long time. And, now that I read back over this story that I've written for you all, I feel like it doesn't translate well into my current mood, but you know what? The times they are a-changin'. That was then, this is now, and darn it, I'm still gonna read it for you. This one's called, A Heat So Wet I Could Taste It. The late summer forest was full of heat so wet I could taste it, and gaudy greenery so lush that it seemed I was surrounded by multitudes of curtains, always being parted by my hands to reveal more drapery instead of a picture window. My right hand clutched my old knife, a freshly sharpened shining steel blade attached to a bone handle, and was sending it slowly gliding through the stalks of the chanterelle mushrooms I was here in search of. My left hand kept the mushrooms still and straight while the fruit became detached from their subterranean mycelium, and then dropped the severed sprouts into my small basket. My eyes were always scanning, searching for the next hint of orange hiding on the cluttered forest floor. The effect of the recent rainfall was still present, and my knees were moist and dirty from kneeling in the wet loam. A small isopod scuttled out from the mushroom I had just harvested, running down and panicking on my finger for a moment before falling to the earth. Sorry about that, little buddy. Home is not a location. It's a feeling and a decision. The uprooted arthropod may have called that mushroom its home, but that domicile could only last until the rubbery flesh chamber deteriorated along with the rest of the insect-sized temporary building. Flux is a given. Home is not a given, it's a luxury, a symbol of safety and comfort, and it's not to be taken for granted. These were the thoughts in my head as I stood up, the chanterelle cluster now contained safely in my basket. My hand landed in a pile of soft, wet, juicy moss as I put weight on my palm to help me stand, and it felt like my hand's home for a split second, as though my hand had emotions of its own and those emotions told the hand that it belonged there. Unluckily for the hand, it had to come along with the rest of me. We trudged forth slowly, my hand parting branches and shooing flies away. The poor thing had no choice in the matter, and while it slaved, I'm sure that it longed for that cool green bed of moss. The birds in the trees twittered and chatted around me, probably gossiping about my heavy footfalls and how many sticks I snapped while traversing the forest. I wanted to tell them that it wasn't my fault I was so cumbersome in the forest, it was the fault of evolution and necessity for guiding my species out of the trees, but I'm sure they would have just laughed more. I tried to ignore the heckling of the birds, and as a matter of course I did not notice that they all stopped singing when I stepped into the grove. As I entered the clearing in the woods, I stretched my limbs, happy to be freed from my fight against tugging branches and irritating thorns. The grove was striped with sunbeams and shadows dancing together, intermingling as though two rival houses of royalty had come together for a grand ball at a palace. They cautiously swung around each other, existed by each other, but never truly shared themselves with their opposite, always keeping a barrier up. The outlines of the shadows wavered and shivered, as though from the soft breeze, but I could not feel it myself. I wished the wind would caress my sweaty skin and cool me from the heat, but the air was stagnant and still in the grove. I chalked it up to the thick tree line that encased this area, but it felt as though I was in a terrarium with glass walls that kept a constant climate. Not to be interrupted from my mission for the day, I stepped into the clearing in the woods, keeping my eyes to the ground to look for fungi. The smooth, grassy floor swished under my feet, and I hopped up onto a strikingly out-of-place stone near the middle of the strange tree-lined chamber. Once I had a different vantage on top of the glacial erratic, I noticed the fairy ring. I had walked right into the circle without seeing it while stretching my sore muscles, and now found myself in its center. Toadstools surrounded me in a 5-meter wide ring, small and white, their caps each 3 to 5 inches above the ground. I've spent hours poring over my mushroom field guides, quizzing myself on the minute differences between each species, but I knew for a fact that I had never seen this example before. The mushroom's flat caps had red, rune-like markings on them, intricately intertwined symbols that I knew were grown naturally with the fungus. The blood vessels, which I refer to them as due to their similarity with veins seen through thin skin, seemed to shape letters in a script unknown to me. I hopped off my rocky perch and knelt down in front of one to take a closer look. I ended up eye to eye with something small and green instead. There was a motionless frog beneath the mysterious mushroom. It was partially concealed by the grass and well camouflaged on its exposed back and head, so I would never have noticed it had I not prostrated myself before it. It opened its mouth at me, and I saw the thick, round tongue contained inside. Never one to intrude, I nodded at the frog and excused myself to go look at an unoccupied toadstool. As I stood, I could have sworn that the slimy critter nodded back. I found another identical frog under the next mushroom, and a frog under the one after that in the ring, and the one after that. The 13 mushrooms in the fairy circle each had a frog resting underneath it, facing towards the large stone in the center of the area. I found myself flat on my chest on the ground in front of one of the unlikely pairs of fungal and amphibial friends. I was looking the frog in the eyes and blinking, and it was slowly and unwaveringly blinking back at me. It would open its mouth from time to time, and I would open mine in return. Communication this was not, but it did seem to spur some sort of bond between us. I would stick my tongue out, and it would follow suit, but if I tried to make a noise, it would remain silent and stoic. After a few times through the routine, I opened my mouth wider than I had previously, and the frog did the same, but as it opened wider and wider, the pink flesh of the inside of its mouth suddenly popped. The effect was similar to a piece of flat rubber stretched wide and then punctured, snapping back to expose nothing. A vacuum existed inside this frog, a blank black nothingness as far as I could see into it. I crawled closer, putting my whole head inside. I tested the breeze inside the frog by getting my shoulder and arm in the chamber and licking my finger, holding it up and, unsurprisingly, not finding any wind. Once my other arm was in, I used it in tandem with its match to pull my waist through, my legs following more easily as gravity took hold of me and sent me tumbling away from the entrance into flat black space. Only then, in free fall inside of an infinitely expansive space completely contained inside a 3-inch long frog, did I take a moment to ponder why the hell I was in this situation. I searched the surrounding infinitum for anything my eyes could fixate upon and came back empty-retinaed. I yelled and did not receive an echo back. I kicked and flailed feebly against the upward force pressing against my underside and debated panicking. Movement of my body changed nothing, and I could not turn on the alarm in my head, however, so I sat back to enjoy the lack of scenery on my ride and think about the situation at hand. What was there to think about? There was no stimulus for my body to take in besides pressure, and I became acclimated to the constant feeling of free fall. It became cozy even, like being cradled by an amorphous entity that feels nothing but love and care. The frog was full of heat so wet I could taste it. Time was hard to keep track of. I slept in free fall, very comfortably somehow, and had no way of knowing how long I was unconscious. I was enjoying my stay in this void. It began to feel like it was where I belonged, aimlessly lilting through the atmosphere without a care. It began to feel like home as I relaxed into the situation. It must have been a considerable distance that I fell through while my eyes were closed, because now dim lights were swirling around my periphery in the blackness, maintaining the same pace as my terminal velocity. They were flickering orbs, alien to my eyes after so long in blackness. The lights seemed inquisitive and curious as they bobbed along, shuddering as they made small corrections to their courses. I could tell that they weren't falling like I was. They hopped up, down, and around me. After a series of waves, beckons, and words of encouragement, they came forward just close enough for me to make out forms holding torches aloft before they scattered completely, leaving me alone in the dark again. I missed them. It was a comfort to know that I wasn't alone inside the frog, and though I did not feel fear, I had so many questions that needed answering about my new environs. Nothing to do about it except wonder and hope they came back. I reclined, if it can be called that, and came to the realization that if my suspicions were true and I'd be living out my days inside this expansive frog, I'd need some company and connection if I didn't want to lose my mind from lack of input. I packed this thought away with all the similar sardines inside the tin can of my mind and did my best to enjoy the peace and quiet, even as the peace and quiet closed in on me like alley cats that had just smelled the sardines in my head. The lack of everything became too much to handle, and I started to sing a silly little tune to pass the time. It sounded like this.
Wraith like clouds soon cover the pale moon. Heard my mind. Atmosphere, currents, wind blow me clean, blow me clean. Atmosphere, currents, wind blow me clean, blow me clean, blow me clean.
After another unknowable length of time, a blaze appeared in the distance, growing larger and larger as I fell toward it. Watching it grow in size, I was starting to worry about a mid-air collision with the patch of light. When I was still above it, it suddenly moved and changed its point in space to a distance that I estimated to be about 100 feet off my flank. I closed the distance downwards, as if I had any other option, and as the shape came into focus, the amorphous blaze turned into many little points of light across a large object. I have no better description for the beast, for it was undoubtedly a beast, than halfway between a whale and an asteroid. It was the size of a semi-truck and a trailer, its skin was blue-gray, and its underbelly and sides were pockmarked with what seemed like craters from high-speed collisions with airborne objects. Stretched across the back of the animal was a sort of city, miniature ramshackle huts and shanties illuminated by small flames, and with little forms too far away for me to make out milling about on the avenues. The creature's massive eye, flickering from reflected torchlight, stared back into my own. Shapes very similar to the markings on the mysterious mushrooms that made up the fairy ring were painted in red around the eye in a ring, 13 symbols arranged in a circle. I felt touched that something else with a brain was inside this frog, but my mind was sent reeling. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. All I knew was that I had to reach the city, if only to touch something after so long. Emissaries were dispatched. 2 lights rose up from the town on the plateau of the creature, lights very similar to those I had waved at previously, and they jerkily careened through the darkness towards me. As they approached, closer than my last encounter, I saw that they were humanoid beings straddling large, flapping, obviously domesticated beetles. The pair of seemingly intelligent bipedal animals, if they could be called that, were not unlike fairies. Each was about the size of my hand, with sharp features, slender forms, and vestigial insectoid wings attached to their backs. Their legs ended in 3-toed feet with raptor-esque talons, which they sometimes prodded their mounts with to alter their flight path. They closed the distance and seemed panicked as they approached. Their arms waved about over their heads, and they yelled grating words at me in what I took to be their tongue, which consisted of snarls and gasps rather than projections from a voice box. Confused at their gesticulations, I just pointed at the bestial city over and over again. I wanted to be there so badly, to sprawl upon the great back. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to find satisfaction upon the spinal column of this massive impossibility. I wanted a reason to have a home inside of God. The duo of flickering, beetle-riding fairies ignored my pleas, and as their panic increased, they started making a gesture where they brought a closed fist down into a flat palm, spreading out the fist when the hands connected. After a few repetitions of this motion, I got the hint. I made the mistake of looking down for the first time in a while, just in time to be greeted with the fleshy bottom of the chamber inside the frog. I was on my back at the time of impact, and my neurons had no time to register the pain and havoc of my spine shattering and my organs bursting before the brain itself was destroyed. Suddenly, the late autumn forest was full of a chill so dry I could taste it. I was sprawled just outside of the fairy ring in the arms of a man in hiking gear. I was screaming through my beard, my dehydrated throat burning at the usage. My skin barely held on to my thin form, my muscles unresponsive to my commands. After the psychotic shock had dwindled, the hiker explained that I had been standing stock still with glazed eyes in the middle of the fairy ring, slouching while perched on the glacial erratic stone. He had pulled me down off the rock, and at once I had gone limp and fallen into him, knocking us out of the fungal circle. I crawled back into the fairy ring, looking under the white and red mushrooms that somehow still stood proudly while the chanterelles in my weathered basket had decomposed to nothing. My fingers frantically brushed through the grass, but there were no frogs standing sentinel under the 13 toadstools. I felt a loss immeasurable, and I tried to weep, but my body did not contain enough water to form tears. Alright, that was a real doozy of a story, eh, everybody? That was a real fun one. Happy spring. I'm predicting that morel mushrooms will be here in about a week and a half, and I hope that everybody gets their little feet out into the woods and finds a few. Fry them up with gnocchi. That's how I like them. And keep your eyes and ears to the ground, and your nose to the air, and your eyes also in the air. And why not your mouth too, for the next odd tale with Otto.